welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. I'm here with Joe Green. Joe, he's back again. He's been on before to talk many a times about Jonestown and also JFK, and then one time, maybe twice, about Robert Kennedy. This time, we're going to be focusing a lot more on the RFK assassination as I've been diving into making witness clips and discovering who or when or what was said at the Ambassador Hotel, who witnessed what. Realize there's a lot of people that were in that small little pantry, so it's very interesting that I don't know. There's just so much about the whole case that's interesting. But Joe, would you mind introducing yourself to everyone out there listening, and then we'll get a little bit of your perspective on the RFK assassination.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I'm Joe Green. I'm a writer and researcher, um, affiliated with COPA for a number of years and the Hidden History Center. And you can find my stuff at Joe Green JFK.
What's your thoughts on the RFK assassination?
Well, um, as far as it being a conspiracy, it definitely has to be a conspiracy. It cannot be the work of one man, and that's just in the range of what's physically possible. It is not possible for Sirhan to be the sole shooter. And he can't be the murderer either. He can't be the person who actually killed Robert Kennedy, basically for logistical reasons. In some ways, the RFK assassination is the most straightforward. It simply could not have happened the way that they say it has happened. And yet, every single story in the major media since this happened has never questioned at all the details of what happened. There's just nothing. So that part's kind of extraordinary. Um,
You mentioned major media though, but do you think they even talk about it? Because the anniversary passed last June and nobody said a single word.
yeah, I mean they mark it as time, and then on the big when the 10, 20, 30, sometimes the fives, they'll put a little story saying how Sirhan did this and that. Um, yeah, nothing ever questions anything that's happening, and they minimize it as much as possible because it's a bleeding wound in America's character, and they have to cover this stuff up because they know they did Bobby Kennedy.
Who did Bobby
So,
Kennedy?
yeah, that's the question, right? Well, you're looking at um, individuals in the government. People have thought that George Joanides was a big part of it. Um, I tend not to like look for those sorts of things because I just don't see them as terribly important. Like who the movers and shakers are, you find their names and you recognize them, and then you look at other cases and you can match them up to this person. But as far as the mechanics, in other words, the people who are actually performing the execution, I think are less important than other people because it would be like a gangland hit. The important thing is who's directing the hit, not necessarily the guy who's actually pulling the trigger. And I think that's definitely true in RFK. Although we have a pretty good idea of who at least one of the shooters had to have been, and there are other researchers who have other people in mind as well as having been in that pantry.
Well, on the basis of what we have historically, at least the media has accepted when it comes to Sirhan, what do you believe his role was? Because obviously you can have a wide range of Sirhan firing blanks, Sirhan being the only shooter, or Sirhan being one shooter out of two that were included into the pantry. Some believe three. They believe just from the angle of the bullets, because one had to look like if someone was coming up from the floor. But I think, in my opinion, I think it would stick mostly around the second shooter thing, depending on the angle of the gun. But what are your thoughts on Sirhan?
So Sirhan appears to be a Manchurian candidate, frankly. I mean, he's the one that gives the most points as to being a Manchurian candidate. He's extremely susceptible. And of course, if you listen to the tapes of the psychiatrist browbeating Sirhan into accepting the assassination, shoot your gun, Sirhan. the psychiatrist is giving him orders in the middle of this, what's supposed to be a recreation. Um, so yeah, Sirhan clearly seems to have been manipulated in some, and to this day, like he says, he doesn't remember anything that happened. But he was doing some peculiar things when he got arrested. He was doing automatic writing, so he's just writing RFK must die over and over again. So he had these repetitive acquired traits um, that said to be, associated with Manchurian Candidate type programming.
When do you believe he would have been a Manchurian candidate? I know a lot of people bring up watching something on television or maybe something of that sort. I know we've talked about World Vision in the past when it comes to Jonestown, but how many of those charismatic Christianity commercials could have been some type of programming or some type of trigger mechanism? I know people bring up polka dot dress girl. That's a good point. Um, I think that could be a trigger, but something had to be implanted in his head before if you're going down the Manchurian candidate route.
Right. And that's where we don't know. At least I don't know. How that would have been put into place. I mean, we have some documents from how these things were done, but we wouldn't have a step-by-step, laying out of what they're actually going to do in that process. Um, we have to judge by how Sirhan reacts now, which is like someone who has been programmed. He has a lot of automatic behaviors that have been programmed in him that he still does to this day. And that's, the best explanation for that seems to me to be that he was in some sort of program.
Now, if you believe that there was another shooter, I'm assuming you're suggesting what everyone suggests, which is Thane Eugene Caesar.
Yeah, yeah.
What about Thane Eugene Caesar in the case is something that you would raise as a red flag of the possibility of him being a second shooter?
Oh, good Lord, just about everything. But so when the assassination happened, okay, Sirhan is standing in front of Robert Kennedy from a distance of about 3 to 8 feet, according to the witnesses. He's shooting Robert Kennedy in the direction of his chest, 3 to 8 feet, shooting him from the front. All of the bullets in Robert Kennedy, and they go through his jacket, are heading upward from down. So it's like somebody shooting at an angle, and they're all coming from behind. And the kill shot is directly against Robert Kennedy's brain. The gun is right here. And we know this because of the autopsist who said exactly what he did, and then had legal trouble. Like he lost his job. He was the I forget what they call that, but he was the main autopsist for Los Angeles County.
Corner of the
Huge
Stars was his name.
corner of the stars. Yeah. And anyway, he had to fight to get his job back, and in so doing, also received a medical opinion that he had produced the most medically perfect autopsy in the world, or something like that. Some hyperbolic statement, but the idea was that the autopsy he did on Robert Kennedy was excellent, and so he got his job back as a result of all that mess.
I have issues with Thomas Noguchi. Not necessarily towards what he did in the RFK case, but learning more about Natalie Wood. And you kind of see that a little bit more towards his career, he started kind of getting more about the media attention rather than he was about the actual doing his job, in a
Oh,
sense.
yeah. Oh, I'm sure. I mean, to be the coroner, and I heard the same thing. You did the Natalie Wood episodes, which I thought were really interesting. But yeah, I noted his presence and his possible cover up, in the Natalie Wood case.
It's one thing that relates to that too is that we have Thomas Noguchi in the RFK case, Thomas Noguchi in the Natalie Wood case, Sinatra in the Natalie Wood case. Have you ever heard of Sinatra being at the RFK? Ambassador Hotel, because a witness stated that, and I don't know. Again, when it's witness statements, especially years after the fact, it's kind of a little bit difficult. Their memory might be fuzzy, but this guy was as stern as ever. Came out 5 years ago. Talked about. They even brought up the question to him about RFK Jr. Saying that he thinks it was Thane Eugene Caesar, and this guy said Bobby Jr. doesn't know what he's talking about. I put my jacket over him when we were at the hospital or something like that. And he talked about that what Bobby Kennedy was doing was he was going because he went once through the pantry, then he had to go back again. And he said he was going to this, and he said that he was meeting Frank Sinatra out back. And he stated that and he dropped it. And I had to message Craig. I had to message so many people. And I go, that would be really weird if Sinatra was there too. I mean, I know he stayed at that hotel before, but I'm just at that time, at that moment, it was just, I don't know. I believe he's connected into more things than a lot of people think, but it was just, I don't know if you've ever even came across that before.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not really an expert on the mob, and that's where the Frank Sinatra thing is going to lead. Um, but I don't find it surprising that he would be there. It was like the biggest thing going on at the time. He was literally winning the uh, the state that night. So it doesn't seem to me that unusual that, Sinatra would show up and say, "Hey, let's go get."
The only thing I found something similar to that was Sheriff Peter Pitches was contacted by Sinatra when Natalie Wood drowned, and he told Pitches to wrap the case up on Natalie Wood. Well, Sheriff Peter Pitches was charged of the LAPD when those files were destroyed by on the RFK assassination. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on there. Maybe that's just a weird connecting two together, but I don't know.
Well,
I mean,
you have to. The LAPD is a criminal organization, right? That happens to be fighting some crime in Los Angeles, but at the same time is also a total mess of people taking money from this. And the institutions that are in LAPD have been there for a long time. I mean, there's so many hanky, famous cases in Los Angeles criminal history. I mean, that we don't know the truth about half of them because of all the people and the powerful people who, frankly, were covering things up.
how much of the case do you think, when it boils down to conspiracy, would be the first thing you would raise to someone that was new? I would always just point at the LAPD and their investigative work. A lot of what it is kind of reminds me of the Dallas police during the JFK assassination, except probably 2 times worse, only in the sense of they didn't bother covering anything up. I mean, destroying evidence before a court trial, uh, missing evidence, missing photographs. And then witness statements, obviously. And then later on, we're going to play Sergeant Hank Hernandez in his interview with one of the crucial witnesses that said she saw two shooters and the kind of beating she got through that, what I would call an
Yeah,
interrogation.
yeah, yeah. I mean, literally, books have been written about the history of the Los Angeles Police Department. Um, and I mentioned this, I think the last time we talked, that um, it's not just in Los Angeles that they were terrorists, because um, Dan Mitrione, James Jones's friend, used to teach the police departments of other countries how to torture, citizens that were upset with the government. There were programs at the time that would send LAPD officials to places like Brazil to help out with those programs that Dan Mitrione was doing training for. And it was partially because the LAPD is so corrupt, and partially because a lot of the members of the LAPD speak Spanish because they have to.
Would this be similar to like what Jesse Curry probably thought that he was getting out of the FBI when Hoover promised that he could make some of his FBI or some of his Dallas police officers FBI agents, and then eventually Hoover screwed him over, and then Curry kind of screwed him back?
Yeah, I mean, that's a no, I think that's more of a, I mean, it involves institutions for sure. Um, but the Dallas one is more personal, and the LAPD is just kind of eternal. It just keeps going, no matter who's in charge. Although You can definitely point to some bad actors in the past. Um, yeah, I you need the novelist to deal with the history of the LAPD.
Now, Thane Eugene Caesar wasn't an LAPD officer. He was just hired as like a rent-a-cop.
He was a rent-a-cop, yeah, because he worked at Howard Hughes Aviation, among other places. But no, Thane Eugene Caesar becomes the prime suspect simply because of his location. So, and that's the thing about the RFK. It's like it's all physical. It's all in the physics. There's a guy in front. He's shooting at Robert Kennedy's chest, and there's a guy standing directly behind Bobby Kennedy. And so he has the ability to inflict the wounds that we actually see on RFK's body. Sirhan does not.
How would you describe, I guess, Thane Eugene Caesar's positioning and holding of the gun to be able to hit Bobby in that way?
Well, it just depends. I think the main issues are, did he have a gun in the pantry? Yes. Did he pull out the gun in the pantry? He says yes. He says he didn't fire. Witnesses, there's at least a couple of witnesses that say that they thought that he was shooting back at the assassin. Um, but as far as the angle of the gun, I mean, if you mean because they're shooting from the hip, that could be true. I don't have strong feelings about that.
I'm not going to play too much of this, but this kind of covers the globe of what we just said. It's from a Second Gun RFK documentary, which I thought was really good. I'm just going
Yeah,
to
that's the documentary.
If somebody says 1 inch and somebody else says 2 inches, that's a discrepancy. But the jury didn't think it was a significant discrepancy, and neither did I.
For the record, the discrepancy is not between 1 inch and 2 inches, but between 1 inch and 2 feet.
What worries me more than a discrepancy in a criminal trial is where you've got all of the witnesses saying exactly the same thing. That's when you have to worry, not when there's a reasonable discrepancy.
Dr. Noguchi, would you tell us about the powder burns? Would it be possible to get powder burns if the gun was 2 or 3 feet away from Senator Kennedy?
In this case, of course, the abundance of powder burn embedded deep in the tissue, it is scientifically highly unlikely.
At the trial, Dr. Noguchi never had the opportunity to elaborate on his astounding findings. His testimony was cut short. In fact, soon after, Dr. Noguchi was fired and accused of being derelict in his performance of the Robert Kennedy autopsy. Attorney Godfrey Isaac defended him.
Well, the first question that I ask of a witness with reference to showing what a competent and really extraordinary autopsy Dr. Noguchi performed, the Deputy County Counsel asked to approach the commissioners, and they're stated that if I went into the questioning further, that it would cause an international incident. I pointed out that what I was going to show would cause no international incident because Dr. Noguchi performed what has been described as the most perfect autopsy in history.
Now, what was meant by international repercussions on that day with regards to Senator Robert F. Kennedy's autopsy?
Well, Deputy County Counsel Martin Weeks did not define what he meant by that, but he seemed to indicate that it would cast a great deal of doubt on what we'd heard about Robert Kennedy's death.
The headlines at the time said that there was a mystery to the Robert Kennedy autopsy.
Well, a paradox that's never been explained is how the Los Angeles County, through the District Attorney's Office, could base a murder charge on the autopsy of Dr. Noguchi, and then in the hearing relative to his firing, tried to take the same autopsy to show that he should be fired. As a matter of fact, I don't think this is something that can be explained, and I think that anyone who reasons and thinks would be naive not to feel there might be some connection with regard to assassinations and what occurred.
Well, when there are witnesses that said Sirhan.
Why do you think Noguchi didn't go along? Why wouldn't they just get someone that would perform an autopsy that would give them the answer that they wanted?
Yeah, I know. I've thought about this for a long time, and I don't have an answer. Um, they must have thought, well, there's two possibilities. One is that they figured that they would be able to get to Noguchi, that they didn't think that he would, in other words, that he would stand by his results if he found something different than what they wanted him to find. So it's possible they just miscalculated and they thought they could get him to do it, and he, in fact, can't. The other possibility is that maybe there was another coroner and they just weren't able to get him there as quickly as possible. You may know Cyril Weck's story about the guy who was the most famous autopsist at the time of the Kennedy assassination, and how that guy was on the phone with uh, Cyril Wecht. He was waiting for the call to go do the autopsy of John F. Kennedy, and he never got the call because instead they were having two guys who weren't, who had never done a bullet wound autopsy to do it. Didn't make any sense.
Do you think it's possible that they thought Noguchi would have just played ball after the number of witnesses would have influenced his report?
I don't think that no, I don't think, because you can't, if Noguchi's going to go against his own autopsy, it's not on an intellectual level. He's not going to go, oh, I looked at the evidence wrong, and therefore the bullets are traveling the opposite way. He's going to be eating it because for political reasons that he would recognize as political. Because I'm sure that, there's a ton of pressure on coroners all the time about one shooting or another.
There's a number of witnesses that described 2 shots, not 3.
Yep.
But one witness, Donald Schulman, was the one that talked about 3 shots. He's the only one that stayed consistent with that statement. So I'm wondering, Kennedy was hit 3 times.
Yeah.
But none of Sirhan's bullets.
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think I don't think that's even possible.
I mean, those bullets made a lot of trajectories that don't seem very possible, but he managed to still hit some people. Like I said, I don't believe he hit RFK at all. But a number of witnesses claiming 2 shots. I'm just curious. I don't think all those people are wrong, but I'm just wondering, how we get such a discrepancy. That's 1 bullet we're missing, not accounted for.
Well, what's his name? The maitre d', Carl Euchre. Yeah. So Euchre says that Sirhan emptied the gun, I believe, because he says that Sirhan got off 1 shot and then he grabbed his wrist and he started banging it on the table. And as he was banging it on the table, Sirhan was still firing the gun. And so there were several bullets that he
As an
fired.
assassin, I feel like if you were thinking in clear mind, you would notice the giant fucking football players that were with Bobby Kennedy in the pantry at the time. I mean, you had Roosevelt Greer, other people. I feel like you would realize you probably wouldn't be able to get much of a shot off after that. But the number of witness statements that followed afterwards, it seemed like everyone had their hand on Sirhan's gun.
Yeah. No.
Because Roosevelt Greer, I think, made a statement about that he's the one that grabbed the gun, held it out for someone else to grab away from him while he held Sirhan's legs or something. And then there's like 3 other witnesses that talked about grabbing the gun from Sirhan. I was like, well, one of you guys are right. Not all 3 of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Lisa Pease, like I say, if you've read her book, she says that Sirhan's firing blanks. I don't necessarily subscribe to that, but it's not a bad idea at all.
Why would you say that if there was 5 other people? How would you account for the other wounds?
Well, because there's another shooter, which is also part of Lisa's thing. Okay. There's another shooter in there that's shooting these people. But the reason why I always thought blanks sort of made sense, without necessarily endorsing it, is because the critical period, like let's say you're doing this, Sirhan's a Manchurian candidate, Thane is the main shooter, and maybe there's another guy who's also shooting. Your main problem is going to be if Sirhan has a live gun, is that he doesn't just walk over and shoot Thane Eugene Caesar in the head by mistake, right? Because he's standing right behind Robert Kennedy. So that would be one of your issues. If you're really setting this up and Sirhan's going to be carrying a loaded weapon, you can't control necessarily who he shoots with that weapon. So you might have some, you might have some questions about what the hell's going on, right? But as far as like the things that I'm positive about, I'm positive that Sirhan did not shoot Robert Kennedy. So whatever else is going on, and there's a lot of stuff going on in this, which we know just because of the number of bullets, they're more than Sirhan's gun can hold. But whatever else we know that Sirhan cannot be the killer of Robert Kennedy. It's impossible.
What would have been the reasonable route the LAPD should have done if they were going to look at Thane Eugene Caesar? Check his gun, right?
I mean, yeah.
Well, if he's got a six-shot gun,
yeah,
check three bullets are
it's
missing.
And whether it's an Ivor Johnson, as it turns out, becomes critical too. Yeah, I don't. It's sort of like saying, like, these guys are not going to do a proper job. So just like at that saying, the cops shouldn't have, that they should have investigated certain things rather than other things. They're only going to investigate the things that don't pay off because the cops are involved in the killing. So it's not like they're trying to be good cops. They're,
I don't know, you got to stay hopeful in some aspect of our government.
Well, no, I understand, but not at that moment. Not at that moment.
I want to play this.
They wouldn't have done it if they had somebody they had to worry about talking.
I want to play this because I think it's irrelevant. Before I do, where did Thane Eugene Caesar, did he ever make the statement that he didn't pull out his gun in the pantry?
As far as I know, no. And in fact, in that film that you showed earlier, which is like still the best film that's ever been done on this case, I believe Caesar says on there that in fact he did.
Well, yeah, I'm going to play that, but I was just wondering where that came from, that he didn't have his gun out.
Oh, I don't know.
Because that became something that Caesar didn't even have his gun on him.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not what he said. And this is right at the beginning.
It is nevertheless reasonable to speculate that a contract killer could not find a more efficient and concealed position to do his deed. First, a clear opening to shoot at the heart, with little chance to be seen by witnesses situated either in front of or behind the victim. Then another opportunity for a concealed coup de grace in the back of the head as the victim slumps to the floor.
To develop further his alternate theory of the assassination, Chirac needed to establish at least one other gun in the pantry besides Sirhan's. On a hunch, he asked Carl Euchre.
Did you see any security guards in that kitchen pantry?
There was a security man somewhere behind me. I don't know how far away from me.
On what side?
I somewhere around right on the left side, right behind Kennedy, somewhere around there.
I see. Well, that would be Thane Eugene Caesar, according to an official police diagram.
A few uniformed armed guards were hired by the Ambassador Hotel. One of these guards, Thane Eugene Caesar, a plumber by trade, moonlighting out of the Ace Guard Service, tells about the strange premonition of his colleague, Jack Merritt.
At 8:30, 8:45, I remember it as long as I live, I was standing at the main door of the ballroom. Jack looks at me and he says, I got a funny feeling there's going to be big trouble here tonight. And I looked at him and I says, why? He says, I just got that feeling. And I just laughed it off as a joke. But maybe he knew something I didn't.
By his own account, recorded in 1969 by Ted Chirac, Caesar is now entering the pantry at Kennedy's side.
For some reason, I don't know why, I had a hold of his arm, under his elbow here.
Which arm?
Would be his right arm. And with my left hand, and I was pushing people with my right because there was a lot that was, I would say, way over 100 people in the kitchen area. Who knows how many. And just as we reached the edge of the steam tables, the little Spanish busboy was standing there, and Bobby turned his head at an angle.
Juan Romero.
Right, to reach over, and he started to shake hands with him. And when he did, that's when the shots were fired. And the thing I saw first wasn't so much the noise, but with the flash. I got powder in my eyes from the flash. And I was a little behind Bobby, so I would say I was about 3 feet from the flash, because I looked up and seen the red gun flash. And like I said, I got a little bit of powder in my eyes.
Then Chirac heard what he had hoped to hear.
When the shots were fired, when I reached for my gun, and this one I got knocked down.
Did you get your gun out of your holster?
Yeah, but it didn't do no good because I'm on the floor.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, I got back up, I had my gun out, but they already had him restrained.
Did you see other guys pull their guns after you pulled your gun that time?
After we went out through the swinging doors, yeah, there was 3 of us had our guns out.
What about in the kitchen?
No, I didn't see anybody else pull their guns in the kitchen area.
Except yourself?
Except for myself.
And you pulled at the instant.
So, what's weird to me is I don't like his laugh when he talked about someone mentioning that something was going to have a bad feeling or something was going to go down. It was kind of weird. But he did just admit to having a gun out, and he fell to the floor. As it possibly could have shot that way as well, too. I bring it up. I don't think he's 100% innocent. Like I said, I just think that there's trying to look at any possible way when you're examining, obviously bringing up the point of a second gunman, because everyone, even the people that have gone to Sirhan's parole hearings, have all said, even if he didn't shoot Bobby Kennedy, he shot me, and I'm fine with him being out. He served his time. So I think at this point now, you got a guy that's still, up for parole hearings and not being released. Raising any point that would just have an interest into the second shooter thing should easily be looked at, and then be able to at least dismiss him because he has served way more than enough of his time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what, and there's been a number of lawyers that have tried to help Sirhan over the years, but he's a political prisoner. And that's the bottom line. He's not in jail because of any evidence. They completely short-circuited that because they knew how bad the evidence looks. You can't prove that Sirhan shot anybody.
Do you know who's forefronted the Thane Eugene Caesar theory, that it was Thane Eugene Caesar?
Oh, I mean, it was pretty early on. I mean, even Teddy Chirac's movie is early 70s. Like, it's within the first 5 years of this happening. That film is quite old, but still, like, excellent. I mean, even that interview alone, the fact that Teddy got that is amazing.
There's because obviously with witnesses in the JFK case, you need kind of witnesses that make a whole bunch of statements, but you need witnesses like Jerry Coley that talk about seeing a pool of blood in Dealey Plaza and then their photographs being taken. The only one I've been able to find that has been not a fringe witness in the RFK case, but he's one that wasn't well accepted, and I think it's because of what happened to him, which I'll play that as well too. But Donald Schulman, have you ever heard that name before? So he talked about 3 shots being fired and then giving a statement to the LAPD, and also talking about seeing Thane Eugene Caesar, the security guard, pull out his gun. Now, he became just lost in interviews and then eventually got dismissed by the same network that interviewed him in the first place. To me, it was just interesting because you now have the guy who said he pulled his gun out, and then you have another person saying he pulled his gun out, but yet somehow that lands into the conspiracy territory.
Well, but that's how all these cases are, right? These wouldn't be conspiracy theories, right? They would be crimes you would investigate, right? So a district attorney doesn't show up and say, "Oh, this is just a big conspiracy theory. Those 2 guys got together to rob this liquor store." I mean, that's the point, is that in all these things, they're called conspiracy theories because if you just handle them like a normal crime, you get the wrong answer. You get the answer that the state doesn't want. And so you have what I've described as a serial killer who has a severe interest in covering up his crimes. And that's what's going on. And that's why we're not allowed to say all this stuff. And they're trying to put a bigger cap on it now for everything that's going on now, so that no one can even express the idea. It's like crime think in 1984. That's where this whole thing's headed.
Did you follow the work of John Judge on the RFK case, or did you do this on your own research?
Pretty much. I mean, pretty much my own research. John has talked about the RFK case. I don't think he ever wrote anything substantial on RFK. Although I'd have to go look, don't quote me on that. But I don't remember like a an article or anything. But he would talk about the case all the time. I mean, he's familiar with the details.
Are you shocked that many people don't research the RFK assassination?
No, I mean, most people don't research anything.
Well, not even the common citizen, but JFK researchers. I noticed they don't even, some of them don't really look into it, which to me seems like the next thing you'd go into.
Yeah, exactly. Although it does seem when you're at the very beginning of this, and you have to keep in mind that the mindset of the people that are looking back then is very different from the mindset of people now. People now, like somebody your age, like obviously thinks that, corruption is corruption, and that if you're a black guy and you get arrested in certain parts of this country, this is not a good thing for you. Like, you could end up dead. Everybody accepts this as a truth of like modern times. But we didn't think like that back then. We didn't have that much, evidence. And so people were definitely shocked when Bobby was killed. I mean, I wasn't there. I was born in 72, but from everything I can read, there were a lot of people who simply went, "This is too big for me." Like, who just said after they killed Bobby, it's like, there's no stopping these guys, essentially, and stopped.
Why do you believe he was killed?
Because he was going to become president, and that was a problem. I mean, that was the whole thing, right? They didn't want Bobby to reopen the John F. Kennedy case, which he clearly was going to do. And so he's back on. He's winning the California primary that night, and everything looks good that Bobby's going to become president, and Richard Nixon's going to have to eat it again. He already ate it once in 60, and he says that John F. Kennedy cheated his ass off to win, and maybe that's what happened. I don't know. But Nixon was going to have to eat it, and that was not the plan.
Who do you believe was in charge of the hit if we talk about Howard Hughes's involvement? Because it was weird how Howard Hughes, the night when all this went down and Bobby died, that he was trying to hire his campaign team.
Yeah.
Why would Howard Hughes do that?
Right. The Howard Hughes angle on this, the thing that's significant about it to me is that in this period is when the CIA had begun to take over Hughes' enterprise. And then Hughes becomes a so-called recluse, right? He doesn't communicate with anyone. And, what's his name was more or less running it. Sorry about my voice. I'm a little sick right now. Robert Bennett. So as the CIA took over Hughes Aviation, Hughes became less and less a person. Like, it was just the guy that was required to sign things occasionally. And that's what's interesting to me, is that there's a CIA connection directly to Thane Eugene Caesar. I
know who you're talking about. I don't think it's Robert Bennett.
I may have the name wrong right now. I apologize.
We know this. We know this guy too, and I can't remember his name right now.
Yeah, it'll come to me later.
He's a CIA guy.
Yeah, because that's a whole. Yeah, I mean, I think you talked to somebody about.
Yeah, I did, and I can't believe I'm blanking on it. I haven't talked about Hughes in a while.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very interesting story as well. But that's how a lot of these things go, man. And all the people that are quiet about it are participating in the cover-up. Because there has to be so many people who know what's going to happen, and some of them make bets on the stock market based on a president getting killed.
Insider trading.
Mm-hmm. That's the other part of all of this.
I'm going to play Donald Schulman's statement and kind of his story that I think probably a lot of people in the case aren't necessarily aware of. They might come across the name, but the footage, like the video for this, you have to click on the second gun, which says 1 hour and 7 minutes, and nobody's going to click that to try and find one thing and search through it. They just want the one clip they want of the guy. But if you haven't heard of this name, this guy was a witness in the pantry, and also his statement that was kind of later covered up by media, what he gave. I find that with the RFK case, it's actually pretty easy to get people on board with conspiracy compared to the JF case because we have so much damn video and audio tapes of stuff that you just play and someone goes, is this real? Like it's like the new JFK tape that just got released with LBJ claiming a conversation with Clifton Carter. I don't know if that's real. I don't know. But it's anything different than the lone gunman theory I'm okay with right now because I'm just tired of fucking hearing it. I mean, the fact that the Trump shooter said how far was Lee Harvey Oswald from the Texas School Book Depository when he took his shot, and then you have Luigi, the guy who killed the healthcare CEO, saying he's not guilty. But then what happens if he ends up admitting to doing it, and then everyone just goes, well, I bet Lee Harvey Oswald was guilty too, and he was just claiming it until the trial or something like that. And that's what I'm afraid that these things are going to get lumped all together because this year alone and last year had been so much major progressions forward for the JFK assassination. And I'm starting to see all these things start to come out as limited hangouts, and now we're getting stuck where we're not going to keep moving forward. And hopefully, I think with RFK Jr. in there, we might get some answers on some things. Hopefully we do. But I don't know. To me, it's just really weird how the media suddenly we got lone assassins again. I'm like, what are we talking about? Like, this is not. Is it because of Kennedy's in office? Is that what's happening?
That's true. No, but it's because they're clamping down on all sides, in particular, on the internet. That's what all this, fact checking and all this stuff has been heading toward.
Well, Zuckerberg admitted it on Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said the Biden administration contacted him about blocking disinformation and misinformation and stuff that really had no basis for it just because it didn't go with the official narrative. He kind of went to cover his ass a little bit, and I think that was wrong because I'm pretty sure he was 100% okay with it. But I don't know, with all these media companies now, it's kind of hard to find a platform where you can kind of speak about these certain things. You get flagged. I got clips flagged for Paul Schrade, and it's like, what, I can't show them alive and fine, but just lying on the ground wondering what the hell just happened.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I want to share this because this is the Donald Schulman statement.
Upon miles of tapes, Chirac finally came across this startling air check, recorded off the CBS television station in Los Angeles the night of the tragedy.
Jerry Dunphy once again back at KNXT election headquarters. Don Schulman, one of our KNXT employees, witnessed the shooting that we've been telling you about. Kennedy was walking toward the kitchen. That was his route out of the ballroom. A man stepped out of a crowd and shot Kennedy. Kennedy's bodyguards fired back. The suspect now in custody at the Ambassador Hotel. Don Schulman of KNXT tells us that Kennedy was shot 3 times.
What is remarkable, besides the fact that this report came within minutes, Sirhan was still at the Ambassador, is Schulman's immediately verifiable accuracy regarding 2 out of the 3 items he reported. 1, a guard did pull his gun, and 2, Kennedy was shot 3 times. In fact, Schulman was the only witness 100% positive and correct on both counts. Even Kennedy's press secretary, Frank Mankiewicz, said that Kennedy had been shot twice, and the press quoted Mankiewicz until the autopsy proved him wrong. On the 3rd item, a guard or guards firing back, Chirac had to find Don Schulman and interview him.
I was in the pantry following the senator. He stopped and shook hands with several people and started to progress again. We were packed in there like sardines. There were lights and cameras and people and a lot of excitement. The senator just finished shaking hands with someone, and another man, I think it was the maitre d', walked up and took his hand. As we were slowly pushed forward, another man stepped out and he shot. Just then the guard who was standing behind Kennedy took out his gun and he fired also. The next thing I knew is that Kennedy was shot 3 times.
Now, how far was Sirhan from Senator Kennedy at the time?
I would say approximately from 3 to 6 feet.
Where was this guard who was firing his gun?
He was standing directly to the side and back of Kennedy.
On what side?
He was standing on the right-hand side.
Now, Don, did you tell this story to any police authorities?
I told the story to several different people, including several police authorities. Right after it happened, I insisted the senator was shot 3 times. I was told by the police...
Which police?
Well, I was told by the FBI that I was told by the FBI, my own news people, that I was mistaken, that I was wrong. The senator was only shot twice.
Now, when you say your own news people, who do you mean?
Well, I was on the air with Jerry Dunphy. Also, I did a tape recording with Jeff Brent. And several people I told. In fact, I also told them that the guard pulled out the gun, and everyone told me that in the confusion I didn't see what I saw. Well, I didn't see everything that happened that night because of the blinding lights and the people screaming, but the things that I did see, I'm sure about. And that is Kennedy being shot 3 times. The guard definitely pulled out his gun and fired.
Now, when you say Jeff Brent, he is with the Continental News Service. When did he interview you?
Well, right after the assassination attempt and all the confusion, I fought my way out of the pantry, and I was heading towards a telephone to call CBS News. Before I picked up the phone, Jeff Brent, who grabbed me and asked me right on the spot exactly what I had seen then, fresh in my mind.
I was about 6 people behind the senator. I heard about 6 or 7 shots in succession. Now, is this the security guard firing back?
Yes, the man who stepped out fired 3 times at Kennedy, hit him all 3 times, and the security guards then fired back.
Then the tape we played is authentic.
It is. It was given I'd say 10 to 15 minutes after all the incidents of the evening.
Now, I'm showing you this story. Can you identify it for us? It's a lead story in the Boston Record-American. It's dated June the 5th, 1968.
Yes, this was sent to me by the newspaper, and the account, which is in the paper, was the same account I was telling everyone else of the senator being shot 3 times and of the guard firing.
Did the Los Angeles Police Department, the Special Unit Senator, ever conduct a face-to-face taped or written interview with you?
They did contact me at CBS as they did everyone else, but as soon as I told them what I told you earlier, they weren't interested in me.
So, exactly how water...
There's more, but there's I'm not listening to a Tide commercial ad. Sorry. To me, that's interesting because you start wondering, you hear things about like Polka Dot Dress with Sandy Serrano's testimony and a bunch of other things where you start going, how much are we missing about this case that just wasn't reported?
Yeah.
Like specific details about pantry witnesses, photographs taken, how many things haven't surfaced or how many things have been destroyed.
Well, there are a lot of independent. Well, let me put it this way: at the time of the shooting, there were a lot of sort of independent press things, like somebody start a local neighborhood newspaper, that sort of thing. And it was kind of funny because at the time there's a war going on between everything that's in the major media and these little, in like city type pamphlets, because when I was first researching this case, I found tons of them in the back in the old days. I was using microfiche, going through these archives and pulling out all these little papers, and but they were telling the truth about the Bobby Kennedy assassination at the same time that the major papers were lying their asses off. So there was an investigation going. It just wasn't by the big guys.
When it comes to press reporters that changed their statements, do you believe that they were coerced by the LAPD?
I think it's in the sense that, like Michel Foucault said, that normal is a process of coercion. So when you're in an institution for a long time and you're dependent on that institution for your livelihood and everything else, and all your friends are at this institution, all your colleagues are at this institution, and you're told something that can't be true, but depending on how much investment you have in that whole rumpus, you may agree to something that cannot be true. And we know it happens over and over again. I mean, in this case alone, how many people must have known that the facts, you don't have to be a ballistics expert to realize that the bullets cannot have created the wounds in Bobby Kennedy. So what are we talking about? And yet nobody Nobody notices. It's like on one of our uh, uh, previous appearances, I mentioned that they had introduced the wrong gun into the trial. Like, how does that happen?
Can you maybe give a little bit of a background about Chirac? Was he the only one that was like a researcher of this at the time doing the reporting? Because we have Mark Lane in the JFK community.
Yeah, no, there were people who were investigating it for sure, but Ted Chirac was, a force of his own. I mean, if you just watching the movie, like he's doing all the interviews himself, which is pretty amazing. So he's getting out there and he's getting on the record and on film. I can't believe Fane said all those things, and he only did it because Teddy was persistent and getting him to go on camera. It's a fantastic film. It's unbeatable. There have been other good ones. Shane O'Sullivan made one. There's been a few, but you always have to go back to the original, that the Ted Chirac one, because it has so much primary evidence in it. And the work he did on the gun that what's his name, Caesar sold supposedly
to a pawn shop
before the shooting, but it turns out to be after by a couple of months. And all that stuff that's all Teddy. Yeah.
I'm gonna play the Sandy Serrano, and I think which is would be a main point of like showing anybody like what the fuck is going on here. Just because on the aspect of I've never seen someone try so hard to change what someone saw, if that makes sense.
Sandy, I'm not going to ask you any more questions. Not a single one. I do want to talk to you like a brother. Look, I presume, I don't know what religion you are. I'm Catholic. Are you Catholic?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Does that mean that you don't practice? Alright, okay, here's the thing. You're an intelligent young girl. You know that for some reason, this was made up. So here's what you have to think about right now, is that I think you owe it to Senator Kennedy, the late Senator Kennedy, to come forth, be a woman about this. If he, and you don't know, and I don't know whether he's a witness right now in this room watching what we're doing in here, don't shame his death by keeping this thing up. I have compassion for you. I want to know why. I want to know why you did what you did. This is a very serious thing.
I've seen those people.
No, Sandy. Remember what I told you about that? You can't say you saw something when you didn't see it. Sandy, look, I can explain this to the investigators where you don't even have to talk to them, and they won't talk to you. I can do this. But I know that as you get older, one of these days you're going to be a mother. You're going to be a mother, you're going to have kids, and you know that you can't live a life of shame knowing what you're doing right now is wrong. Well, maybe you don't feel it, but when you get older, you will. But please, in the name of Kennedy,
I don't want to move in with Kennedy. I'm going to get fitness.
If you know that this is wrong, I mean, Sandy, you know that this is wrong. You may want to be pushing it off with a smirk on your face, with a smile, but you know that deep inside what you have done.
I remember seeing a girl.
I'm talking about what you have.
I remember seeing a girl. I'm assuming she's obviously talking about the girl in the polka dot dress. Now, there was 3 people, I think, in the ambassador pantry that had a polka dot dress on.
Yeah, although the polka dots on the dress were very specific because they were larger and purple or black, if I recall correctly.
And I believe she was running out saying, "We got him, we got him.
We got him, we got him." Yeah. Yeah.
Do you believe Sandy Serrano?
Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't I?
Do you believe it was some type of freak occurrence? Much like with the JFK case, where there's a lot of those weird anomalies that kind of pop up, the things that kind of don't fit in anything, either whether you're fighting for a conspiracy or you're still fighting the Warren Commission side. They're just random, like a 6'2" blonde guy in Dealey Plaza with a rifle. Like to me, I don't even know what that would do.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, do you mean in the fact that they gave her this interrogation?
No, more like what she saw. Could she have been a witness like that saw something that could be something, but it could also have been a freak thing? There's a guy, I forgot the guy's name. He was running and got arrested in the Ambassador Hotel by a security guard because he was running with a poster that was rolled up in one of those poster like the and he yeah, it's Michael something. I'll find it. I got a clip for it because, like I said, I'm tired of saying this stuff and then not being able to find it. So yeah, his name is Michael Wayne. Michael Wayne, and it did turn out there's a photograph of him of Robert Kennedy signing something for him, so he definitely was doing what he said he was doing, and he was released. But obviously there's a lot of anomalies that start to happen, and luckily for a lot of the stuff with the RFK case, I guess maybe because it was a small enclosed spot, we were able to get a little bit more conclusions on certain things, but there's still a lot that is left empty because of the fact it leads to LAPD destruction of evidence. I'm going to play a little bit more of this.
Here about saying a person tells you we have shot Kennedy, and that's wrong. No, it isn't. Please, don't have to help Look, I love this man. And you're saying right now, he can't even... Well, I'm trying not to shout, but this is a very emotional thing with me too, you see. Are you afraid right now, Sam? Are you afraid? No, I don't like this. I know you don't. I'm afraid. I just don't like it. No, you're afraid. Now, you see what happens. There's two ways to approach this thing. What? The first one is for me to appeal to you as a decent woman that campaigns for Senator Clinton. This is the one way I can approach. The other way is for me to hold up the paper, go up here and tell these people, having come where they're going to come upstairs. And this is the wrong way because, look, I have to look at myself. When I shave in the morning, I look at myself. And right now I have my deepest compassion for you because you're a young lady. And I want to try to do whatever I believe is best for you. What's best for you?
Well, there was this girl coming. She was coming downstairs and she said, we shot. No, this girl in the polka dot dress, a white dress, polka.
Don't. It's like a disease. I know what I'm telling you. I know what I'm telling you.
It said I've never even seen a girl with a polka dot dress.
I'm saying that nobody told you we had shot Kennedy.
Yes, somebody told me that we had shot
Kennedy.
I'm sorry, but that's true. That is true.
Look, one of these days you're going to be 27 years old, 28 years old. What kind of a person?
It's a whole mess of things.
What's that going to be?
Well, it's too messed up. Even I can't even remember what happened anymore.
But number one, you know that nobody told you we had shot Kennedy.
No, somebody told me we had shot Kennedy.
No, nobody told you. Where did they tell you this, Sandy?
Outside.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Yes.
I'm not going to play the rest of it because it kind of goes on for another 5 minutes doing the same thing. But that's crazy that we have that to be able to be like, come on. We don't have anything. We don't have any footage or recording audio tapes. No one brought that into the JFK thing when we're having Oswald and his interrogation. We're going by statements and documentation, which obviously people are going to leave off if they were interrogating them. But we have a couple people, police officers, that made statements talking about seeing Oswald in the hallway when he's being taken back and forth between interrogations and saying each time he looks worse. So, this is it's a smoking tape for sure, but it really backs up. Like, there's so much primary evidence that you could use in the RFK case where I'm still wondering how Sirhan, this isn't even brought up in the trial at all. Any of these audio tapes, any of these things, any judge would look at this and be like, all right, whether he took a shot or not, there's obviously something else going on here.
Yeah. The judge has to be pretty incurious, but I mean, that's the reason that he got picked that he's the judge who's hearing that case. I mean, that's what we found in, in the Martin Luther King case, for example. If you have the wrong verdict as a judge, we're going to throw you out and we're going to get you a new judge, one that sees the program. That's how all this stuff is covered up, is because of these little pressures. Dan will take care of this for us. That sort of thing, that type of thinking.
How many of these situations with Bobby Kennedy, similar situations, do you think have been conducted throughout history?
I mean, endless. Like we were saying before, it's like I point people to Shakespeare. I mean, Shakespeare's history plays are nothing but conspiracies. They're all about conspiracies of one guy's trying to do this to the king, and this other guy doesn't want him to do that because he's loyal to this faction. And European history is full of conspiracies, and they don't shy away from it because, of course it happens all the time.
Why do you think that some are less looked into? Like, if it happens more common than we think, we only really talk about the RFK, JFK, MLK, and then John Lennon's assassination, and then maybe um, there's another one in there. Fred Hampton, I think that's just well established that he was just slaughtered by the Chicago police. So I don't think that one's as necessarily as conspiratorial, but that is one of those ops that happened. I mean, they targeted an individual.
100%. I mean, that's the realization to make. We're not connecting these things because they're conspiracies. It's because they're state murders. They're the state murdering its own people. That's what we got. And that's the way you have to look at these things. It's not, you can get hung up on this idea of conspiracy, and it's just the state killing people it doesn't like and then trying to get away with it. That's what this all is.
Do you think,
I mean,
do you think Sirhan will ever be like actually paroled? Why do you think he's changed his statements over time? He's kind of admitted and then not admitted, then admitted. He's done a Mark Chapman.
Yeah.
He's kind of gone back and forth.
Yeah, because you're in there. I mean, you're in a totally non-socialized environment all the time. You're staring at walls. Imagine doing that for decades. And Sirhan is not he's not a well guy to begin with. So, yeah, it's unfortunate.
Where would you direct people to information on the RFK assassination?
Well, of course, there's fewer good books in RFK than in the other assassinations. But yeah, you can. I think any of the major books are pretty good. Even the ones that are false have like Dan Moldea has information in it that's useful, even if his conclusions are all screwed up.
Even Vincent Bugliosi?
Vincent Bugliosi for
RFK.
For JFK?
For RFK.
Oh, for RFK.
He believed conspiracy, which none of the lone nutters like to admit.
Yeah, no. It's like I said before, though. The problem is there's better things to read on RFK than Vincent Bugliosi. And once he's on this JFK thing, that he's going to actually write this book for $1 million, for over 20 years or whatever. Yeah, I don't need your opinion on RFK. Yeah, it's like, that's fine. Yeah. Oh, it's like Noam Chomsky. MLK is a conspiracy. None of the other ones are conspiracies. It's like, why MLK? Well,
why does the line stop?
Yeah, right. If you understand what happened in the Martin Luther King assassination, then it should not be that hard to understand, Bobby, for example, or any of these cases, for sure.
Is there anything that you feel like should be addressed in the RFK case that we haven't addressed already?
I mean, besides just letting go of Sirhan and getting a full statement of apology and acknowledgement that this has always been just about physics and nothing else. I mean, he can't be the shooter. I would like to see a statement like that. And I'd like him to be let go. But as far as answering like other questions within the conspiracy, I mean, there's things that are of interest, but I don't think there's any major questions as far as Sirhan's innocence is concerned. So I think we should just be letting him go. Like, it's so obvious that we should let him go. It's not like I have to make much of a case.
Well, Joe, I appreciate the time you gave me to come on here and talk about the RFK assassination. I know we didn't have a whole planned out thing here, but I've had some clips that I've recently come across, and obviously it sparked up my interest, much like the JFK one has done for me. And I'm hoping to get a little bit more knowledge on it, and I appreciate the time you gave me to do this. Is there a place where people can find your links?
Yeah, Joe Green JFK. That'll get you everywhere you need to get to.
Now, Rich, does he do the RFK one or no?
Yeah, it's not as much of a focal point, but yeah, I mean, he knows. I'm sure he's read all the major books.
Okay, I know he's a researcher too. I'm just wondering who I got to speak to next. All right, thanks, Joe. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank. Stay tuned for our next episode.